Breaking: a Canadian Prime Minister weaponized electricity against the most powerful man in the world, and American cities are bracing for blackouts. Tuesday morning, President Donald Trump unleashed his most devastating economic threat yet against America's closest neighbor: 100% tariffs on every single Canadian import entering the United States. The trigger? Canada's quiet preparation to cut power exports to 6 U.S. states. This isn't just about tariffs anymore. This is about energy sovereignty, about whether a middle power can use its natural resources as a geopolitical weapon, about a relationship forged in war, now fracturing over watts and volts. 3 weeks ago, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stood before Parliament with a sobering announcement. If Trump follows through on his tariff threats, Canada will retaliate, not with matching tariffs, but with something far more devastating: energy leverage. The numbers were stark. Canada supplies 60% of all energy imports to the United States, 3.8 million barrels of oil per day, 8.4 billion cubic feet of natural gas daily, and 8% of America's total electricity consumption, concentrated in 6 states that cannot replace Canadian hydropower quickly or cheaply. Carney's message was crystal clear: economic coercion cuts both ways. Those words would have been unthinkable just 1 year ago, when Canada quietly accepted Trump's 35% tariffs on steel and aluminum without serious retaliation. Today, they're Canada's new reality. The plan Carney outlined to his cabinet was straightforward. If Trump imposes 100% tariffs, Canada would immediately suspend electricity exports from Quebec to New York, Vermont, Maine, and New Hampshire. Within 72 hours, Alberta would reduce oil shipments to Midwest refineries by 40%. Within 1 week, British Columbia would halt natural gas exports to Washington and Oregon. For American energy markets, this was an existential threat. The integrated North American power grid depends on Canadian hydropower for base load capacity that cannot be replaced by natural gas or coal on short notice. But in Washington, Trump saw something different: blackmail. Trump's response came through Truth Social at 6:47 a.m. on January 22nd. The Post sent shockwaves through both Ottawa and Wall Street. If Canada thinks it can blackmail the United States by threatening to cut off energy, they are making the biggest mistake in their history. 100% tariffs start immediately. We will find new energy partners who respect America. The irony was impossible to ignore. Just 3 weeks earlier, on January 2nd, Trump had praised Canada's reliability as an energy partner during a press conference announcing new domestic drilling permits. Canada has been very good on energy, Trump told reporters. They supply us fairly, and we have a good relationship on that front. What changed? Carney's China deal. His refusal to remain silent about Trump's annexation rhetoric, his declaration at Davos that Canada would no longer accept economic bullying. Trump had tolerated Canada's energy exports when Ottawa was compliant, but when Carney stood defiant, those same exports became leverage. The numbers tell a sobering story. Canada sends $450 billion of goods to the United States annually. In return, the U.S. exports $350 billion to Canada, but the energy relationship is deeply asymmetric. Midwest refineries are configured specifically for Canadian heavy crude. They cannot easily switch to lighter U.S. shale oil without billions in modifications. Quebec's hydropower provides 11 gigawatts of electricity to New York State alone, enough to power 8 million homes. Replacing that capacity would require either new natural gas plants taking 3 to 5 years to build, or importing more expensive power from distant states. Neither option could prevent immediate blackouts if Canada acted on its threat. Mark Carney is not a typical politician. Before entering politics, he served as governor of the Bank of Canada and later the Bank of England. He understands leverage, markets, and the psychology of negotiation better than most world leaders. His energy threats was not impulsive, it was calculated. Trump's tariff threats. his claims that Canada should become the 51st state,
Both
his
energy and
repeated
geopolitics
insults calling
have laid
Canada
bare
a
the
suburb
risks
of
extreme
America,
global
his
integration.
demand that Canada
more
accept
recently,
U.S. trade
great
terms without
powers have begun
negotiation.
using economic
All of it pushed
integration
Carney
as
toward
weapons.
weaponizing Canada's
Tariffs
one
as
true
leverage,
strategic
financial
asset,
infrastructure as
energy.
coercion, supply
Carney
chains
told his
as
cabinet during a
vulnerabilities to
private
be
meeting on
exploited.
January
On
15th
Arctic
that Canada
sovereignty,
had tolerated
we stand
American
firmly
economic coercion for
with
too
Greenland
long.
and Denmark
We
and
have
fully
bargaining
support
power, he
their
said,
unique
according
right
to sources
to determine
who attended.
Greenland's
It's
future.
time we used it. If Trump wants a trade war, he'll learn that Canada can fight back in ways he hasn't considered. But the risks are enormous. Canada exports $140 billion in energy products to the United States
So we're
annually.
working
Cutting those
with our NATO
exports would
allies,
devastate
including the
Alberta's
Nordic
oil
Baltic
producers,
Gate,
Quebec's
to further
Hydro-Quebec
secure
utility,
the alliance's
and
northern
British
and
Columbia's
western
natural
flanks,
gas industry.
including
Canadian
through
jobs would
Canada's
vanish,
unprecedented
provincial revenues
investments
would collapse.
in over-the-horizon
Trump
radar,
understands
in
this
submarines,
vulnerability.
in aircraft,
His bet is
and boots
simple.
on the ground.
Canada needs U.S.
Boots on the
energy
ice.
revenue more than America needs
Canada
Canadian
strongly
energy.
opposes
That
tariffs
economic
over Greenland
pain will force
and calls
Ottawa to
for
back down.
focused talks
That Carney's
to
threat is a
achieve
bluff designed
our
for
shared
domestic political
objectives of
consumption,
security
not
and
serious
prosperity
policy.
in the Arctic.
But energy analysts saw something different, a fundamental miscalculation in Trump's strategy. Canada can sell its oil and gas to other markets over time. The U.S. cannot replace 3.8 million barrels of oil per day quickly. That asymmetry gives Canada more leverage than Trump acknowledges. Daniel Yergin, energy historian and vice chairman of S&P Global, warned in a Financial Times op-ed that Trump's tariff threat ignores the integrated nature of North American energy markets. You cannot simply replace Canadian heavy crude with domestic shale. The refineries don't work that way. The infrastructure doesn't exist. The timeline is measured in years, not weeks. Critics within Trump's own party saw the escalation as reckless. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, chair of the Senate Energy Committee, issued a rare public rebuke. Threatening our energy security over trade disputes is dangerous policy. Alaska depends on stable energy markets. So does every American who pays a power bill. Republican governors in states dependent on Canadian electricity scrambled to contain the crisis. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, no Trump ally, nonetheless pleaded with the White House to de-escalate. 8 million New Yorkers cannot be pawns in a trade war. If Quebec cuts power, we face rolling blackouts within 48 hours. This isn't negotiation, it's madness. Canada is not alone in recognizing energy as geopolitical leverage. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum quietly coordinated with Carney on a joint energy response. If Trump follows through on 100% tariffs, Mexico would reduce natural gas exports to Texas and reduce cooperation on oil production in the Gulf of Mexico. The strategy mirrors what Europe learns during its energy crisis with Russia. Dependence creates mutual vulnerability. The importer and exporter both suffer when flows stop. But the importer suffers first, and voters notice blackouts faster than lost export revenue. Trump's energy secretary, Chris Wright, privately warned the president that Canada's threat was credible. They can do this, Wright told Trump during a January 18th Oval Office meeting, according to White House sources. And if they do, gasoline prices will spike 40% within 2 weeks. That's political suicide heading into 2026 midterms. For Alberta oil producers, the crisis represents economic devastation, but also opportunity. Canadian heavy crude sells at a $15 per barrel discount to benchmark prices because pipeline capacity to U.S. refineries is constrained. If Canada diversifies to Asian markets through expanded trans-mountain pipeline exports, that discount narrows. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith joined Carney in Ottawa on January 20th to coordinate provincial responses. We cannot be held hostage to American tariff threats forever. If that means short-term pain to build long-term energy independence, Alberta is ready to make that sacrifice. The timing is critical. U.S. refining capacity for Canadian heavy crude is finite. Midwest refineries in Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois process 2.1 million barrels of Canadian oil daily. They cannot switch to lighter domestic shale without extensive modifications costing $8 to $12 billion per facility and taking 18 to 36 months to complete. Trump's threat of 100% tariffs is designed to force Carney into submission. The economic impact would be catastrophic for Canada. Overnight, Canadian lumber, aluminum,
Automobiles and agricultural products would become uncompetitive in U.S. markets. Industries would shutter. Jobs would vanish.
But Trump faces his own constraints. Canada is America's largest trading partner. 35 U.S. states count Canada as their top export market. American manufacturers depend on Canadian inputs for everything from steel to softwood lumber to auto parts. A 100% tariff would devastate integrated supply chains built over 30 years. American consumers would face immediate price increases. Gasoline up 35 to 45%, electricity up 20% in 6 states, groceries up 12%, home construction costs up 18% due to lumber tariffs. The political backlash would be severe, particularly in swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Trump is betting Carney will blink first, that Canada needs the United States more than the United States needs Canada, that economic pain will force Ottawa back into line. Carney is betting otherwise. He's wagering that Trump's threats are mostly bluster, that the economic self-harm would be too great, that energy leverage, even if painful, is worth the price of sovereignty. One of them will be proven right. The loser will pay an enormous price. Amid the public hostility, quiet diplomatic channels remain open. Vice President J.D. Vance spoke with Carney by phone on January 23rd. The conversation, described by both sides as frank and constructive, focused on finding off-ramps to the escalating crisis. Vance reportedly told Carney that Trump's tariff threat was designed to force concessions on border security and defense spending, not to actually collapse the North American trade relationship. Give him something he can call a win, Vance urged, according to Canadian officials briefed on the call. Announce increased border patrols or a commitment to NATO spending targets. Let him save face. Canadian officials pushed back. We will not be bullied into policy concessions because of tariff threats, one senior Canadian diplomat told reporters on Background. If the president wants to negotiate border security or defense cooperation, we're happy to discuss it. But negotiation means both sides come to the table as equals, not as master and vassal. There is precedent for Canada leveraging energy against the United States. In 1973, during the Arab oil embargo, Canada exempted the United States from export restrictions. But the gesture came with conditions: American cooperation on Arctic sovereignty, respect for Canadian resource management, recognition of mutual dependence. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau used energy exports as diplomatic capital, not just revenue. He understood that geography made Canada indispensable to American energy security. That leverage, carefully deployed, could protect Canadian interests without triggering retaliation. For 50 years, that approach worked. Trump has upended it. But the context today is different. In 1973, the U.S. imported 35% of its oil. Today, it's a net exporter thanks to shale production. American energy independence, at least on paper, should reduce Canada's leverage. Except the reality is more complex. U.S. refineries are configured for heavy crude. Canada has it. American shale doesn't. Carney is betting that technical dependence matters more than headline independence, that Trump's rhetoric about energy dominance ignores the reality of refinery economics, that the American president will back down when gasoline prices spike and voters demand answers. Will Trump actually impose 100% tariffs? The threat remains vague on timing. Immediately, he said, if Canada weaponizes energy. But Canada hasn't cut exports yet, so why haven't the tariffs been implemented? The answer may be that Trump is waiting to see if Carney backs down, or it may be that his advisors have convinced him the economic damage would be unacceptable, or it may simply be that Trump's threats are designed for domestic political consumption, red meat for his base, not serious policy. Carney, meanwhile, faces his own uncertainties. Cutting energy exports would trigger immediate legal challenges under MUSCA, the trade agreement that replaced NAFTA. Article 605 prohibits restrictions on energy exports, except in emergencies. Trump would argue Canada's action violates the treaty, justifying American tariffs as lawful retaliation. This isn't just about tariffs or trade agreements anymore. This is about power, about whether a smaller nation can assert sovereignty in the face of superpower coercion, about whether economic interdependence creates mutual respect or one-sided dominance. Trump's threat wasn't just about trade deficits or border security. It was about establishing hierarchy, reminding Canada of its place, demanding deference. Carney's response was a rejection of that hierarchy, a declaration that Canada will defend its interests even against its most powerful ally.
This isn't just a trade dispute anymore. This is a test of whether middle powers can chart their own course in a world dominated by superpowers, whether energy sovereignty still matters in an age of integrated markets, whether defiance is courage or recklessness. History will render its judgment, but for now, Mark Carney has made his choice, and Donald Trump has made his threat. The collision course is set, and the world is watching to see who blinks.